Today's November 25th, 2019, and this is Celtics Beat on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider of audio and video coverage for the Boston Celtics. I am Josue Pavon, episode number 342 featuring Celtics legend Cedric Maxwell. It's brought to you by betonline.ag. Go to betonline.ag and enter the promo code CLNS50 for a 50% bonus on your first deposit. What's going on, Celtics fans? Josue Pavon here, filling in for Adam Kaufman on this brand new episode of Celtics Beat. Very excited to get into this one, and we're going to call this one the Cedric Maxwell Podcast Takeover episode. Got my podcast co-host Cedric Maxwell joining us, and we have plenty to discuss. Of course, we had the Celtics 5-game West Coast road trip. They went 2-3. We got the Kemba Walker injury, what that means for the Celtics moving forward, what happened with Marcus Smart in Denver, and a lot more to get into. So let's waste no time and bring in our guest. Joining us now is my podcast co-host and, of course, radio announcer for your Boston Celtics, Cedric Maxwell. Max, of course, you were on the road throughout this 5-game road trip. Give me some positive takeaways before we get into Kemba Walker and everything else that went down on the road.
Actually, it was a pretty good trip for the Celtics. People would say, why would you say they came back with a losing record, 3-2 out of the 5 games? I think the thing you look at is how they played. The 3 games they lost it with a total of 8 points combined. They played, people always say that LA Clippers, and they are one of the best teams right now in the league. And this is the first time you played them with Paul George and Kawhi together, and you had an opportunity to win that basketball game. You were up by 10 with about 6 minutes to go. So there was some real positive things. Watching Jason Tatum take over that game in LA, I thought that was, a good positive move. Marcus played well. And they did a lot of this without Gordon Hayward around. And I think that was really impressive with me, thinking about who they were at the time and collectively how they played as a unit.
Yeah, I think out of the entire trip, that was the best part of it because, like you said, without Gordon Hayward, you're going up against 2 superstars like Kawhi Leonard and, of course, Paul George. But then also, like you said, Jason Tatum, for him to come up big in that moment and to hit that big 3 against Paul George. Of course, you would love to see the Celtics win in overtime, but I think there's a lot of positive takeaways when you look at just how deep and how threatening that Clippers team really is.
Yeah, the Clippers are a deep team for what they're able to do. You started out the trip, you kind of squeak one out against Golden State, then you go into Sacramento, who's playing really well now, and you lose at the buzzer with a shot by Marcus that just rolls off the rim. Phoenix is another team that's playing well. You're able to beat them. So you did some things with your team, and and a lot of it you did it with it was a great team effort, and I think that's what you're really looking at with this team. And so now you come back home and kind of start this thing over again, jumpstart it.
Brad Stevens Sunday afternoon after practice called what happened to Kemba Walker a minor miracle when you consider everything that happened, of course, and what we saw, the image of seeing him on that stretcher. He says that the Celtics got really lucky because he was actually still is listed doubtful for this matchup between the Celtics and the Kings. Just talk about what it was like to be around the team following what happened to Kemba Walker. And did you get a chance to speak to anyone in particular, maybe a couple players or coaches about what happened?
Well, I actually was talking to some players, and I saw Kemba. I saw Kemba get on the plane and get on the bus, and he was up there with no neck brace. He looked like he was doing fine in Denver. When we were coming back on Saturday, that was a positive sign. Talked to Ojale. Actually, was the one his head hit into his stomach and kind of compressed the neck. And he was like, he looked like he was a little shaken. He felt bad, but those things happen in a game. When you're out on the floor, I think the worst thing any player could happen to any player is that he walks into the gym and then they take you off in a cart. I think that's a nightmare for any player. Unfortunately, in this situation, it looks like Kemba Walker is going to be fine. I think that he hit his neck, he was down. What I did like was the fact that there was some hand movement almost immediately, and then they immobilized him. They did what they were supposed to do. I think the fact that he blacked out for about a minute, and I think that's what really had everybody really scared in the arena and a lot of the players.
Yeah, Brad Stevens talked about the two conversations that he had with Kemba Walker. One was immediately after he collided into Semi Ojeleye, where Stevens just knew he wasn't himself. He said he was okay, but he knew just by talking to him that Kemba Walker wasn't okay. And then the second conversation was much more encouraging. That happened after the game, but still, to see Kemba Walker listed as doubtful, and looking like he could potentially make his comeback this week. 4 games this week for the Celtics would be huge for this team.
Yeah, this team, would love to get that emotional start coming back if Kemba's able to play, but I don't think that he's going to be out for no more than about 2 games if he plays. And he might even play tonight. What I understand is that he was not put in concussion protocol, and they did a baseline check with the doctors in Denver and did with the Celtic doctors, and then they'll come up with some kind of conclusion at the end of the day. But the Celtics got very, very lucky, and he's very fortunate right now to have Kemba Walker maybe back and even playing tonight.
Another incident that happened in Denver, Max, was a altercation or a spat between Marcus Smart and a fan that was in the crowd in Denver. Of course, Marcus Smart was very upset about it because he told security about this guy who apparently told him to stay on the ground and get on your knees after Marcus Smart went for a loose ball. And, of course, the security officer didn't do anything about it. The fan stayed in his seat, didn't even get approached about the situation. And it was interesting what Marcus Smart had to say, because after the game, he was, of course, still upset. And to put it the way he put it, it was very interesting. I'd love to hear your take on it. He said that probably if I was a superstar, they probably would have done something. And it is what it is. Like I said, we're going to end up protecting ourselves eventually, and it's not going to be pretty for a fan, and we don't want that. What's your take on that, Max? I mean, how much can these fans really get away with in the sense of, having that access, being that close to the players? Of course, basketball is the only sport, if you really think about it, that allows fans to be this close to the players. And if security doesn't hold fans accountable at NBA games, it's only a matter of time before we see these kind of situations escalate. What's your opinion on this? What can the NBA do to make sure that something like that doesn't happen?
I don't think that there's too much you can do because fans are that close to the tape, to the floor. I think one of the things you do is, I think if you look at it, that in a lot of arenas, they have a code of conduct. And if somebody says something, what they tell the player to do is go to security, like Marcus did, and that fan will probably be escorted out. I don't know why Denver did not do anything, but it's just one of those things that you live with in the NBA, and the fact that you can be so close to the players, you can literally reach out and touch them, and there is no buffer zone. So it's a no man's land, and eventually something will happen. If it's not to a fan, it's going to happen to a player, and that's just the way it goes. I think it was a couple of years ago. There was a young boy that ran out on the floor and touched one of the players. That just shows you how close the fans are and how anything could happen. Fortunately, most time people go through a metal detector and all those things, but it's one of those things. The NBA is probably, that's their worst nightmare, thinking about something like that happening to a player or to one of their fans.
Before the season started, for most Celtics fans, they had this day on their calendar circled, and that was, of course, seeing Kyrie Irving back in Boston against the Celtics. That, of course, isn't going to happen. Kyrie Irving will not make the trip to Boston. He's been nursing what they're calling a sore shoulder injury, so he won't be making the trip. This is 1 week ago, or at least over a week ago, Bob Ryan on his podcast alongside Jeff Goodman on the CLNS Media Network said that he was told that Kyrie Irving wasn't going to make that trip to Boston no matter what. Are you surprised by this? Are you surprised that Kyrie Irving isn't making this trip? And if so, what does that say about him, and potentially when will we see Kyrie Irving back in Boston facing the Celtics?
I didn't know if he would make the not. Kyrie's a great player, and I think he would love the competition of it. I was there when he came back to Cleveland, and boos rained out on him. So it's unfortunate. What is it? If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, well, it is a duck. I just don't know in that situation. He'll be back eventually, one way or the other. And like you said, most people put this on their map and said, this is the game I want to see when Kyrie comes back. And if you're Kyrie Irving, you look at it too and say, hey, I want to come back. The crazy part about all this is that Kyrie could potentially come back and play against the Celtics in Brooklyn on Friday. So, just kind of buckle up. Eventually, Kyrie Irving is going to be playing against the Green here in Boston. It just is not going to be at this time.
But if Kyrie does that, Max, I mean, that's not a good look for the dude, right?
You know what? It's never a good look if you think you're ducking in the opposition. But let's just back up a minute and say that Kyrie is nursing a shoulder injury, and he's healing at home, and he can play back at home. Let's just give him the benefit of the doubt here. That it isn't the fact that he's afraid of Boston fans. I think that Kyrie Irving's a competitor. He's played in many big stages where he's been booed and been a villain. So as a player, to me, I loved it. I love the fact of going into a place and people were booing me. That just happens.
Wow. You're going to give him the benefit of the doubt, Max? I don't know, man. If you ask me, I think Kyrie Irving's going to prolong this trip as long as he can, maybe up until a first-round matchup series between the Celtics and the Nets. I mean, that would be something I would love to see.
Well, you'd love it. Wouldn't it be just so ironic if Boston and Brooklyn played against each other in the playoffs?
I'm hoping that happens, man. First-round matchup.
Wouldn't that be a hot ticket that you think about, Kemba going up against Kyrie, his old teammates? I think it would be a really good series. And so, eventually it's going to happen. I always say be careful what you ask for, because Kyrie Irving, we know, can be one of those, he can be a flamethrower, and he could be a problem. So I think that you just, let a sleeping dog lie. And, eventually it's going to happen.
This edition of Celtics Beat is brought to you by BetOnline.ag. Football and basketball season are in full swing. Get into the action. Get into the game with our exclusive sports betting partners, BetOnline.ag. Sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit and start betting college or professional ball. Every spread, every total, every win or loser, straight bet, parlay, or tease your way through the season. And you can even bet on wild proposition bets like who will be the first head coach to get canned in the NBA, who will be the NBA MVP. I mean, these are just a couple examples of how you can win easy money. Get the fastest to market odds, updates, and payouts with betonline.ag. Head over to the website today, or you can use the mobile device and join. Use the promo code CLNS50 to receive your 50% welcome bonus. That's betonline.ag. Betonline.ag. Make sure you use the promo code CLNS50 to receive that 50% welcome bonus. That's betonline.ag, your online sportsbook experts. All right, let's get back to this conversation with Max. Speaking of playoff matchups, Max, the NBA is currently discussing radical changes, including a mid-season tournament. They're talking about potentially the top 16 playoff seeding. That's something that has been discussed before in the past couple of years. What do you think about that? Let's start right there. The top 16 teams make the playoffs, and then you would rank them that way as opposed to putting the top 8 from the East and the top 8 from the West. What do you think about that potentially happening, and what do you think that would do for the league?
I think it would be a good thing. When you think about it, I think that you have to also think about the players. How would it be if you were ranked and you were a bottom team, or just say you were the Celtics, and you matched up and your first round opponent was, say it was LA, the Clippers or the Lakers? Wouldn't that be amazing when you think about that? Having different factions play each other, I think is always good. So, I think that punish the teams in the East, and you don't punish them in the West. You just rank everybody, and the teams that have the better records, which should be the case, they're the ones who are going to get the better seed. So I would like it. I just think the only thing you start looking at is the wear and tear on the players. A 7-game series against the Lakers or the Clippers, if you're Boston, that line alone would be surreal when you think about in a playoff series early.
I just feel like you have to add a couple of off days in between those games in a 7-game series, because if you're traveling from Boston to LA, I know they don't really change much when it comes to the NBA Finals, but those couple of days or two, I think you put those in between, and I would love to see that. And I also think, and I've been saying this for a couple of years now, I would love to see the league just trim down, 2 or 3 teams, just sort of keep things more competitive, because essentially if you're one of these bottom feeders, it's really tough for you to make the playoffs if it's not the same format that it is now.
Well, if you are a bottom feeder, then that is going to be tough on you, and then you're probably going to be one and done. But I think that the format to me sounds really good the way you're talking. But I'm gonna throw another wrinkle in. What would happen, and we're just because we're going out there, what would happen if you played the Lakers and the Clippers back to back? If you were the Celtics, how much it would be theater, be great drama, but man, how much wear and tear would it be on if you had 2 West Coast trips at 2 different times?
Right.
So I think that the NBA, it sounds good theoretically. But, boy, if some things came out and you were playing the wrong team at the wrong time, there's somebody who's going to have some, going to pick up some miles, some hell of a jet miles. So I think that you look at it also in that way for the players.
What do you think about mid-season tournaments?
I don't like them.
I don't like it either.
I don't like the idea of playing a mid-season tournament. To do what?
Right.
What are you getting out of a mid-season tournament?
Wear and tear.
I don't understand what the format would be if you have a mid-season tournament to do what?
Right.
Other teams aren't going to play?
I just feel like it would just be bragging rights, and what's the point of that?
Bragging rights for what?
Exactly.
You wanted the mid-season, and you get a mid-season trophy. That doesn't. It really doesn't even. I'd have to see the format or see what they were really talking about, because if you're telling me we're just going to play a mid-season tournament for what reason, I have no idea.
Maybe to spice things up a bit and get more of that competitiveness that we talked about a couple of weeks ago in the podcast. Remember,
Well, you're already playing. Wasn't it very competitive when you played the Clippers? Wasn't it very competitive when you're going to play the Lakers?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a natural process for almost any team, and who's going to be left out and who's going to be put in. Right. You're talking about the mid-season tournament, so you're saying that other teams are going to be able to rest while you're playing in a tournament game? I think you look at the Celtics even now, the way it's set up. You think about I think the camaraderie the Celtics had by playing on the USA team, I think that was good for them. With Jaylen Brown and Marcus and Kemba and playing in those games, I think it was good. But also, when do you rest your body?
Right.
The summer is normally time you have to rest your body. My theory has always been either you rest your body or your body is going to rest you with an injury. So I think that you start looking at the product. You can't burn the product out. I mean, and that's one thing you're talking right now about load management. So I think that's the biggest thing that's going to come up, load management for players. Unless you start to reduce the season by 10 games, and I think the NBA has done a pretty good job of not having a bunch of back-to-backs. The Celtics don't have too many, but the one that they have is going to be a couple they have is going to be tough. They have a back-to-back against Milwaukee. So you're going to be flying through a couple of time zones to fly out to Milwaukee on a second night of a back-to-back. That's going to be tough.
I like Adam Silver's approach in the sense of keeping an open mind, but I don't think he needs to consider every single idea that's thrown out there,
Well, Well, I think there's so many ideas. I think the one that is going to eventually, they're trying to find out how to do a game or have a team. And the only place I can see you can have a team would be in Mexico City. I think that population, I think, is dying for a team. Would you want to play in London? Have a team that's based in London? How would that work out? So far as travel. Mexico City might be the closest thing around with a huge population, a huge following, that you could maybe have a team there.
That would be interesting. Yeah, we'll see what happens, moving forward. But it wouldn't shock me to see something like that happen and see the NBA add a team that's not necessarily in the U.S.
Well, I think that's the one. I mean, obviously playing in Canada, Mexico is, next door. The travel wouldn't be as severe. You think about some of the teams. A lot of the games right now are already, dubbed in Spanish. So I think that they want to include that, and several teams have gone there and played games during the year. Played in Mexico City. The Celtics did. Played Sacramento in Mexico City a couple of years ago, and the travel wasn't bad. So I think that would be one of those places you'd have to look at.
All right, Cedric Maxwell, I'm going to let you go, but I want to give you the floor right now. Let these people know what we're doing with the Cedric Maxwell podcast, man. Give them a little tease since we're taking over here on Celtics Beat, and let them know what this podcast is really all about.
Well, the podcast is about a bunch of fun. If you tune in, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised about, be it a casual fan or a real fan of the game, is that we don't just talk about basketball. I think the thing that we've always tried to focus, I've told stories about myself and things that have happened and a lot of stuff off the court. And we've taken on social issues and talked about all the things that might happen and just tried to broaden our horizon, give you some of that information and some of the headlines from a basketball standpoint, from a player, but also from a person who's just been around. We've talked about racism. I talked about how I lived in the South, and I grew up in a situation where there was a bunch of rules and segregation. So I look at a lot of things differently. And so you'd love to listen. If you're interested, we'd love to have you as a listener.
Absolutely. Max, keeping it 100 on the Cedric Maxwell podcast.
That's it. Keep it, as you would say, 100. We're keeping it 100.
All right, Max, I'll see you tonight, man.
All right, later.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of Celtics Beat. Special thanks to Kaufman for letting me fill in. And, of course, special thanks to all of the listeners. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the Cedric Maxwell podcast. And make sure you give us a review on iTunes. Everyone out there, have a great Thanksgiving. Stay safe, and I'll see you sometime down the road.